You are listening to Africana Woman with Chulu. The Africana Woman is a live show that highlights our stories in our own words. We believe that to attract the lives that we truly desire, we must smash the culture of silence around the things that hold us back or keep us stuck. In our tribe, rest assured, you are not alone. The Africana Woman is for you, by you, and about you, no matter where you are in the world. So let's get started. This is the first ever episode of Africana Woman, and the Africana Woman highlighted this week is Elishibah Msengeti from Kenya. Elishibah is the founder of the Classroom Outside, a mentorship program that imparts the life skills on youth by reflecting, processing, and interrogating the various facets of life's journey. She is a graduate of Wellesley College, where her major was International Relations and Africana Studies. She is currently completing her master's in Women Leadership and Governance at the Africana Woman Studies Center at University of Nairobi. Besides being an avid reader and writer, she enjoys hosting and coordinating events. She is married to Poriot, and the two are blessed with two beautiful children. So today, we are diving into the topic of African women role models. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. Let's get started. Welcome, Elishibah.
Thank you, Chulu. I'm really happy to be here and very honored to be on your show. Thank you.
All right. So let's get started. I think the first thing we probably should do is define what a role model is. So what would you say is a role model?
I think as the name suggests, it's somebody who models something for you, and specifically in a particular role. And I say that because you can be a role model, not necessarily in the entirety of your being, but particularly in a specific role. So there are people who are role models because of the way they mother. There are some who are role models because of the way they lead. Some because of the way, they have a healthy lifestyle. And so this is somebody that we can look up to. And I would want to differentiate a role model from a mentor, in the sense that a role model can be far away, like you don't necessarily have to know them. They don't need to know you. They could also be dead. And whereas a mentor has to be, you have to have a relationship with them. I think that would be the difference. So a mentor is often also a role model, but a role model is not always necessarily a mentor.
That makes sense. Okay, so I think my first question to you my second is, how do you think African women are perceived? I think there's probably two answers to that, like perceived by other people who are not African, and then also perceived within our own cultural context.
Yes. That's a very big question. How are they perceived? I think how African women are perceived has changed over time, over the years. I think there's been some progress in terms of women's roles, for example, were often seen as domestic, and there was this assumption that women's place is at the home, and that the public space is therefore just for men. I think we've seen over time that has changed, and that narrative is changing. I think the African woman is also actually seen to be quite involved, I would say, in nation building, quite involved in the society. Often you'll find, even in Africa, the countries are known as, a mother, like a nation is known as a mother, or even Africa itself is known as the motherland. And I think that speaks to how African women are viewed and how women are viewed in Africa, not necessarily African women. the power that they hold. I would say how African women view themselves also has continued to change and is continuously changing over time. And I think how we see ourselves, because I'm an African woman as well as, and you are too, has been influenced obviously by history and how we've been viewed over history. But more and more, I think we're seeing a global view of ourselves, that we are capable, that we have certain liberties to choose how we want to live. But at the same time, we're still bound by some cultural expectations, some social expectations, that you can only rise so high, you can only dress a certain way, you can only look a certain way. I think these perspectives are constantly shifting and constantly being reimagined, I would say.
Okay. So what do you think is the importance of having African women who are role models?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question. One is just, first of all, it's very important for us to be able to see people who look like us, who have had probably a similar background to us, probably similar opportunities and challenges to us. It's very important to be able to see those people succeeding, and they open up a possibility, a certain level of possibility for us. Number one. I think number two as well, it actually empowers us to reach higher, higher goals, higher ideals, because sometimes we are limited by our own mindset. And when you do have somebody who's really succeeded or done well in one aspect or the other, it challenges us to be able to reach higher. And then I think the third thing I would say that is important is it also allows us to be truer to ourselves, right? So we do tend to set very high standards for ourselves. I think sometimes we can be very hard on ourselves as women. And when you have a role model, you're able to see them in their entirety, that they have flaws, they have weaknesses, they've had failures. So, when you go through your own challenges, the role model, whatever they've also gone through, you're like, okay, so if they were able to get through this, then so can I, so you're not viewing yourself as that this is happening to me and it is only unique to me, and that, it's the end of the road. I would say that those are some of them, that's one of the reasons why it's very, very, important. And then also, but they also help you to not make the same mistakes sometimes, because you can sometimes you can just learn and see, this is what she did. It didn't turn out so well. There's a saying that you don't have to learn from your own mistakes; you can learn from other people's as well.
Yeah. So I think something that I've heard quite often is that African women don't like to work together, or they don't like to see the other succeed. So how do you think this affects having healthy role models, like healthy relationships with role models, or being able to see someone as a role model when, I don't know, what do you think of that stereotype?
Wow. Okay, so I'll give two answers. I think that men, just like women, also do sabotage each other. I think, unfortunately, people make it sound like only women do so. But in reality, I think, power is something that people fight for. Resources are things that we fight for, I think, from the beginning of time. And I think the primal instinct is to kind of get ahead, right, of the other person. Now, do women sabotage each other? I don't think this is unique to women, but have I seen women sabotaging each other? Yes. And I think I can give an example. I happened to be in a certain, let me say, shall I call it an organization or a group that I joined last year, which had various generations of women, right from some who are in their, I would say, 50s, maybe even approaching 60s, and then 50s, 40s, 30s, and 20s, right? And I think my expectation when I was joining this group and I went in, with everything that I had, my expectation was that this was going to be a space where I'll be nurtured, I'll be mentored, I'm going to have older sisters to look up to, because a lot of the women in that group are quite successful in terms of their careers, in terms of family and everything, right? So I was very disappointed to find that some of the women that I was hoping to look up to are actually very concerned just with getting their way or finding success for themselves, even if it means stepping on other women. It was very disappointing. There was something we were working on, an event we were working on. It was very sad to see people using even like very dubious ways to make themselves look better than the others. It was very disappointing because I actually believe there's enough success to go around for all of us. And also it was disappointing because I think there was such a space and an opportunity there for us to work together as women. And it was completely wasted, unfortunately, by actually the older generation. And so I think what that taught me, and not all of them were like that. It was actually just a few, but they happened to unfortunately be the loudest or maybe the most powerful in the group. But what I took from it is also that we cannot, you can't have a blanket assumption that all, for example, that all successful women are great role models, and also that I have to pick and choose. Like you can't. It doesn't mean that if you're successful. And whatever we define success to be, that you are automatically a role model. I think that was such a huge lesson for me last year. And I was able to separate, from this group now. I'm still in the group because, I'm like, never say never. I mean, never say die. But I was able to say, okay, so are there some in this group that I can actually learn from? And those are the ones I'm focusing on. And then these other ones, I'm just like hoping, they'll become better and do better for themselves and for the generations coming behind them. And I mean, that's just one example, that I think was very close home for me. We've seen it also politically sometimes, women, sabotaging other women or judging them more harshly. But I really think that by and large, I wouldn't say that that's the majority of what women, that's what majority of women do. Unfortunately, those who do that tend to be very loud, very strategic. Yeah.
So, we all have different definitions of what success is. It doesn't necessarily always have to be monetary. And I agree with that. And I think following up to that, because I have, I think especially with the age of social media, where people want to always show the good side of their life, and they're not necessarily willing to show, even those hard times. And, if you're a young lady or, whoever you are looking for role models, and you're searching on the internet, you're searching on social media, and you're only seeing that positive side, but don't necessarily get to learn from the mistakes of somebody else. What would you advise somebody to look for in a role model?
In one sentence, I would say authenticity, probably. I would say, what's the word I'm looking for? A holistic view. And you know, the like you rightly said, I think social media has put a certain pressure on us to only present certain aspects of our lives that we think the world wants to see. And I think what I have done myself is I've always made it a point to, if there's somebody that I admire, I try and read up more about them, like how did they actually get to where they are. And often you will find that it hasn't been as rosy as it seems. So I'm very, very aware that what we see sometimes is just the product, but not the process. And I think as women, and we have to seek to understand that process as well. In fact, it is very misleading if you only focus on the product, because then you want to skip the process for yourself and, you know, get to where this person has gotten to, not knowing how many tears they shed, how many nights they stayed up alone, I don't know, crying or working on their computer or praying or whatever it is, right? Not knowing what they had to lose and compromise to gain what they have now. I mean, I think about in any of the successful women or role models even that I see, you know, and you find that the journey has not been that rosy. And I'll give you a very recent example. I think for me was last year we were planning an alumni day for my high school. And the day before the event, I had just come from another organization where I was working, and I was feeling very uncertain about my own, let's say, career path, right? Feeling like, okay, where is this all headed? Am I, you know, failing at life? You know how we all have those moments. And so interestingly, so the alumni day was supposed to be the following day. So I happened to be at the school, setting up, talking to the students, like making sure they have the program for the day. And then the school principal was there as well. And we just got talking in the evening, like once everything was done. And so I think she just asked me, so how's work or something like that. And I opened up. And do you know, she shared her own journey about, you know, some of the battles she's fought, some of the times when she wasn't sure that she was even cut out to be a teacher, leave alone a principal. Some of the times when she's had people that she has really trusted kind of disappoint her. And I mean, for me, it was such an eye opener, because here she was, she's a principal of a very good school. And, you know, all I could see is this product of, this is a successful woman who is now leading an institution. But she allowed me to see this other side that people don't often see, and that many people probably don't see. So you probably see her and judge and think, oh, she's always had it easy or whatever it is, right? So I think also beyond us seeking that, seeking those stories from the role models that we see, I think we also owe it to those who watch us, whoever is kind of either younger than us or even our peers who are looking at us. And we also owe it to be authentic, to be real, to share. If we want to share, since nowadays we all share everything, but if we want to share, that we're not just projecting. I am constantly happy, successful, looking healthy, never broke. Do you know what I mean? Like, I really think we owe it to each other, because we are also putting. We're living falsehoods, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I so agree. And I'm glad you said that because I was going to add it. I think, we're in a society where we have surface level relationships and conversations, when we're so programmed, if somebody says, "Oh, hi, how are you?" The automatic answer is fine. And that may not necessarily always be the answer, and we don't want to go a bit deeper. And I think when you can just be authentic and show up authentically, that really does help you. And you'd be surprised where your help comes from and where your allies come from.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey sis, thank you for listening to Africana Woman with Chulu. This show is only possible because of your participation. These are your stories in your own words. There are actually 2 ways that you can be featured in the Africana Woman Network. You can either be a guest blogger on the Africana Woman blog or a guest speaker on the Africana Woman podcast. If any of these interest you, please contact me on africanawoman@gmail.com to learn more about the procedures to be approved. Now, back to the show. So let's take it back now. Now we're going into our history books. This is like before colonial times, our ancient history. Who do you do you think there are African women role models from the past, from what we've learned in our history, in our curriculums?
Certainly. There are very, very many. And if we can, I think we could go pre-colonial and then colonial and then post-colonial, right? I think pre-colonial, some of the role models happened to have been women who either had a political role or a spiritual role in their societies. And I'll give just a few examples, and I'll start obviously with right here in Kenya. There's a lady known as Mekatilili Wamenza, and Mekatilili Wamenza came from a community in the coastal part of Kenya called the Giriama, and she lived during the time when the British were in Kenya. They were obviously colonizing the country. They were instilling the hat tax and all that the colonizers used to force people to work or to labor in their farms. And Mekatilili happened to be a widow. And I think there's something very interesting about that because, interestingly, in her community, and I think in a lot of African communities, widows held a different status in society, in the sense that because they didn't have a man to kind of defend them because the husband already died, they were almost allowed to then speak in some of those forums where men would only be allowed to speak. Certainly, this was the case for the Giriama. And at one point, there was a meeting, they were having a village meeting, and the British, whoever chancellor or whoever it was talking about how the men need to pay hat tax, they need to work in the farms. And it was basically forced labor and enslavement. And then also in line with that was Christianity, which was that you have to do away with your Giriama culture. And she was completely against it, started speaking up against it, started doing a funeral dance in the middle of this meeting, and also now traveled village to village and made people take oaths that they will not listen to what the British are doing, are saying that they're going to resist. And once the British realized that this woman is causing trouble, they actually sent her away to a really far away town, like 1,000 kilometers away. She escaped and walked back, like walking on foot, and came back and continued with the resistance. And eventually, they imprisoned her now in Kismayo in Somalia, where she eventually died. But I share this story because I think we think that women power, quote unquote, is something new, but it's not. This is something that existed in Africa from way before. This Queen Nzinga of Angola, right? She's also quite famous for that, and known to have led also her people to resist colonization, right? And she, in fact, they say even when she was talking to the Portuguese, she would sit on her subjects back so that she can be on the same level as the Portuguese, and in fact, I think what stands out for me for this queen is that first of all, she ruled for 37 years, but after she died, for 80 years after that, there were women rulers in the kingdom of Dongo, which is now present day Angola. So you can see that she set a certain precedence for women, for leadership. Then there's Nehanda of Zimbabwe. I'm sure maybe you're familiar with her, seeing as Zimbabwe is neighbors with Zambia. And Nehanda was a spirit medium. So that's how I was saying a lot of the women that we look up to as role models of that time had either political, military, or spiritual roles. And so Nehanda was a spirit medium who led or inspired people during the Chimurenga Wars, where they were resisting, the Shona were resisting the colonization by the British in the 1896, around there, right? Who else? There's another one that I find to be very interesting. So in Ethiopia there was Menelik II. So I think many people have heard of the Battle of Adowa, and which was where the Italians were defeated, embarrassed by the Ethiopians. So what many people don't know is that, so obviously Menelik but Menelik too had many wives, and one of his wives was Taitu. She was called Taitu Beto, and she is known to have been a very, very serious advisor to her husband, the emperor. And she's actually the one who gave the idea. There's a treaty that the Italians and the Ethiopians signed, the Treaty of Butale, which basically, to the Italian version of it, said that Ethiopia now has become an Italian, protectorate or colony. But the Ethiopian version said something completely different, right? It was in Amharic. So this is such brilliance, that is maybe not even recorded in books, but this is a woman who's she's leading from behind. When they say, behind every successful man, there's a woman, and she is actually credited with naming Addis Ababa, giving Addis Ababa that name of Addis Ababa. And this is something, many people, I think, don't know. And I think why I'm bringing her up is also that even in their roles as wives, as mothers, as the various roles that these women were playing in society, they are role models. We don't have to think that we are limited because I'm not the president, I'm not a minister, or whatever it is. Whatever role you have, you can use it. There's a power to it. So those are just some of the ones I can say from what I'd call pre-colonial Africa. There's obviously Shaka Zulu's mother. I think many people know her as well, for how she guided both her husband and her son. So there are many women like that we can look up to as role models. And then if you want, we can then move on to like the colonial, post-colonial. They're also very...
So I think one of the things I just want to take note of is there are some African curriculums that don't necessarily highlight women, especially pre-colonial women. And it's not that they don't exist, they do, but we have to be more vigilant with finding their stories. And I think in the last few years, last decade or so, there has been a lot of movement and a lot of people that have, done their research and really made the resources available for us to be able to learn more about African women role models that are from pre-colonial times. So I think we also just have to be vigilant in terms of finding out who they are, what they did, and keeping that knowledge alive.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of this knowledge is not found in books because it was passed down maybe orally. A lot of this knowledge is also not found because history, as you know, always glorifies the storyteller, the whoever the hero was. And for a long time in Africa, and I would say in the world, history was written and recorded by men. Right. So I think we have the onus is also on us to rewrite that history, to have it out there. To one of the projects we did at the African Women Studies Center, where I'm doing my master's, was literally making a video. I think it was like a 45-minute video on these women that I'm talking about, these African women role models. And I remember there was, I think, an exhibition at the University of Nairobi. And for some reason, the president just happened to stop at the booth, the African Women Society, African Women Studies Center booth. And he stood there for quite some minutes. It was just intriguing, I guess, to have those stories. And they are interesting stories. They are interesting stories. They are intriguing. They're inspiring. And I remember, we kind of got just like a presidential acknowledgement, and the next step, we're putting this on YouTube. We need to have this on TV. We need to have a series, because these stories are not told, and they could actually really, really inspire generations.
Yeah. So who do you have in the next era as an example?
As an example, I think they are people like Winnie Mandela, right? So this is the colonial, I would say, South Africa, can we call it colonial? I don't know. But I would say people like Winnie Mandela, because of the role that she played while, people forget, while Nelson was away for 27 years, somebody else was somewhere leading the struggle and holding the fort together and holding the home together. And so I think for that, we can admire her. I would say there are women, even in Kenya, we have like Field Marshal Muthoni. People know about the Mau Mau fighters, but people don't often know that there were women who were in the front line of this fighting, or who were actually maybe cooking for the fighters, hiding them in their homes and things, playing such roles, which were very important to the struggle. And then I would say also, maybe not so much colonial Africa, but even post-colonial. So there are women who helped build the nations in the post-independence. There are women who, I would even say someone like Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, for example, Liberia, right? And I like to use Ellen Sirleaf Johnson for many reasons. One is that you see, I think in the African notion of womanhood, there's a very big concept of motherhood, right? And motherism, what we'd call motherism. And Ellen Sirleaf Johnson used this ideology to her advantage, in the sense that she took on, when she was coming up as a leader, she said Liberia is her child. She wants to treat Liberia as a child, and she wants to heal Liberia. Right. And bear in mind, she was coming up against people like Charles Taylor and Samuel Doe. I mean, these guys were they were not dictators, but what's the word I want to use? They were very, let's say, bad people, right? And the way that Ellen Sirleaf Johnson went about it was, first of all, participatory kind of leadership. She would, when she'd speak to the people, she would speak in Creole, you know. But then when she's going to speak to America, because as you know, like Liberia and Sierra Leone were founded, I guess, by the US when freed slaves were returned to Africa. When she would go to speak in the US or to Americans, she would speak, you know, the way Americans would speak. But when she comes down to the ground, she's talking to the people in Creole. She even changed. She used to wear power suits, what we call power suits, I guess, and changed her dressing and started wearing more of this African wear and the headgear that is now her trademark. And, you know, using just that concept of this is our country, we need to nurture it back to health. She was able to lead, right? There's Lema Bowie also in Liberia, who I think she also won a Nobel Prize, I think same time as Ellen Sirleaf did. And she led the Women of Liberia movement also for peace. Again, working directly with market women, with, you know, the what you'd call the common woman, you know, and creating a movement that was so powerful. I think we have women like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, you know, the one of Nigeria. And she's a good role model in the sense that, so she's not colonial or what I would call post-colonial. But I think of her as, I think she went up and was very senior in the IMF, World Bank, and is now, I think, one of the most lauded or praised and well-known economists of the world, not just of Africa. So I look at these women and think, yeah.
Yeah, Elishibah, sorry, I just want to just say, if you are watching, please do add names of women, African women you believe are amazing or, you know, role models. I think it would be good for us to all see who are great role models and who we can go and do a bit more research on. So if you have anybody, please do add them in the comments. Sawad 18 said, I wish this could be a weekly series where you focus on one leader each session. So if anybody is excited about that and would want to take that up, that would be amazing. Yes, Elishibah, continue.
And that's also, like, I know Sawad is joining from Cambridge, all the way from Cambridge. So that's quite awesome. Yeah. So I was talking about some of these women. I want to mention a very interesting woman. She's called Speciosa Kazibwe. So Speciosa Kazibwe was Uganda's vice president from 1994 to 2003. And she was actually the first African woman to hold such a senior position, you know, like elected into that position in a sovereign nation. I know many people know Ellen Sirleaf as, you know, first African woman president, and then Joyce Banda later, you know, who rose to become president after the president actually died. But Speciosa was vice president of Uganda. She was a medical doctor. She is actually still alive. She's a brilliant woman who helped especially women entrepreneurs in Uganda, did it from the very grassroots, started off at the district level, province level, then rose through the ranks, and then was elected into that position. And I mean, she had so many good policies, especially around food security and agriculture, to a point where she had a role, I think, in the OAU, which I can't remember the title, but she had a very senior role there, and was acknowledged by the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization. Now, here's the interesting thing about Speciosa Kazibwe. She, in addition to being this amazing political leader, amazing woman mobilizer, she was married to a very violent husband. And at some point, she had to file for divorce. Why am I bringing this story up? She filed for divorce, and everybody suddenly forgot how amazing this woman was as a leader. And everybody was focusing on the fact that she can't hold her marriage together. She can't hold her home together. Her husband was like, why, he can't stand a woman who's coming home late. Why is she moving around with male politicians? Why is she not cooking for him? Things like that. Yeah? And I'm oversimplifying the story. But the thing was, she was now judged on the basis of not being able to hold her marriage together. First of all, the very idea that as a woman, it is your role, responsibility to hold the marriage together as if you're married to yourself. But also, secondly, this notion that if you're succeeding politically, that needs to be the same at home. It needs to align. Your public and private life has to align. But also, thirdly, this idea that that she should allow herself to be beaten. She should remain in a violent relationship to remain a good role model, quote unquote, because now even women were saying she's now become a bad role model. She's not a good role model anymore for our children, for our girls, because, divorce is shunned, divorce is frowned upon. And I actually think this woman is super courageous, because she could have died in that relationship. Right? She could have, it was completely the right thing, I would say, for her to do. And she ended up, I think, I think she had to resign eventually as vice president. Not entirely sure that it was because of the divorce. But I think of her and think of how many women have had this pressure of you need to hold a certain image at your own expense, at the expense of your own safety and health and well-being, for you to be acknowledged and lauded as a role model. I think it's very unfortunate. But I also think she must have paved the way for many women who are too terrified to take such a step, and I'm sure she said she made them realize, well, you kind of need to stay alive even for your own children and for your own self, right? So that's an example I find to be interesting in terms of the duality of what's expected of women in the private and public space. Yeah.
Sawad says that there's always double standards for female leaders. I think that's so true.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So I guess I'll follow that up with, what are the effects of not having African women role models?
Yeah, I think the effect is the opposite of what we talked about at the beginning, right? So I think if having African women role models or female role models enables us to reach higher, to be ambitious, to be courageous, I think the opposite then is true. That and I think you see it sometimes. I think I see it especially in some schools where maybe there has never been a girl who has gone on to do well. So maybe all the other students also think the highest they can get is whatever the highest person ever got in that school, right? So I think not having role models limits our horizons in a way, because we can only see as far as that person, as the people ahead of us went. I think also sometimes allows us to make mistakes, or leads us to make mistakes that we could avoid, because there was nobody to lead the way. There was nobody to show the way, so you're over there fumbling, because there's nobody to guide you. There's nobody to tell you what to do. I like, Sheryl Sandberg in her book, Lean In. Sheryl Sandberg is the COO of Facebook, right? I like her book. It's one of the books I have found to be very useful for me in my professional life, I would say, right? Because she talks about the importance of having a role model, but B, also a mentor, and C, what she calls a sponsor, like another, which could be another woman or man who can speak for you, who can be your advocate, so to speak, like when there's an opportunity, they put your name on the table and say, hey, I know Chulu should be able to do this, and so there are all those roles there are all those people that you should have. Your role model, you should have a mentor, you should have a sponsor, you should have accountability partners and all of that. But I think the not having a role model kind of, you just fumble in the dark, and
it'll take that much longer for you to get where you want to.
It really will. It really will. And I'm telling you, when you have somebody that you're looking up to, and you're able to see their whole journey holistically, you're able to learn, of those, what we are calling the quirks and the gaps even in their journey. I think it is so encouraging, empowering, inspiring, all those things. And the converse is true when you don't have a role model, especially one that looks like you or has had the same background as you have.
Very true. Yeah. So I guess I would like to ask you, what advice would you have, one for upcoming role models? And what advice would you also give to young ladies that are looking for role models?
So I'll start with the possible role models, and I think my advice would be that they need, or we need, because I think we all have the potential to be role models to someone. We need to be courageous enough to share our stories, to share our struggles, to not try and sugarcoat and make it look easier than it really is, right? We also have a responsibility, I would say, even within the family, for example, to reach out to those younger than us, whether they are our siblings or cousins or whatever it is, because we cannot also be inspiring the world and not doing anything with those that are closest to us. And then for women who are now looking for role models, I would say, I think, seek those women out, seek those stories out, like look for them, look for what was the journey, what was the process, and you'll be surprised. Actually, I have found that when you ask some of the women that you really admire, if you get a chance to ask them, what did you do at 24 that I could be doing that could lead me to where you are? You find that many of them are actually very open to sharing. They're very open to teaching, so, that I think as young people, we also need to have the courage to look for those role models and to look for teachable moments all the time, because you have to own your own journey as well. If you can't wait there waiting to be inspired, you have to seek inspiration, I think. So that would be my advice, that we seek to inspire and to be inspired.
Fantastic.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Elishibah. I feel like she is a well of knowledge when it comes to African women role models. Now, these are my 3 takeaways. Not all successful women are role models. Seek to understand the process of a woman's success. And when you are looking for a role model, look for authenticity. All right. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Pandora, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you click that subscribe button. You will be helping us so much if you first subscribed, gave us a 5-star rating, and then reviewed the podcast. We would love to hear what you thought about this episode. I also love talking with you, so come on over to my social media and follow me at Chulu by Design. Or you can join the Africana Woman tribe on our Facebook group and dive deeper into this topic. So, see you next week for the next episode. Always remember, my desire is that you fall in love with yourself, flaws and all, and attract the life that you desire. This has been a production of Ulendo Creative Media. You can find out more about their services on www.ulendocreative.com.